Well, welcome everybody. We've got a lot to talk about, and I'm going to keep myself honest till 1 o'clock. Well, I know this is the wrong time. 1 o'clock till a little after one, just to respect everyone's time. But the questions that Fulia did send me, I want to make sure I got all of them here. So if there's something else that you were thinking in the drive over, make sure we add it to the list. So what kind of paperwork for the first hire? What are the important things when you go from 0 to 10? Interviewing and recruiting techniques, job posting tips, how to retain talent, how do you know if they're really committed to the company, and then bonus payouts to talents. Those are the ones I've got. Anybody else have any other one for the good of the order? No? Yes.
I had a general topic.
Tell me.
Interviewing, like, I'm sure you're going to cover that, but like, just good techniques for finding out, is this person really good?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and so the biggest tip I can give you is make sure you ask the open-ended questions. So to say, do you like to work 8 to 5? Or do you like it when your boss gives you feedback? And just the yes or no's usually don't do it. So to say, how do you like to work? What was your last project like? How did you interact with your peers? What would your boss say about you if I called him? Or her. So things like that gives the candidate a chance to talk. And so you have a better chance of evaluating. There are lots of tests that people start to give and personality tests and all that. It's really the best you could do is face-to-face. And those tests aren't even supported by the Department of Labor. So they won't let you hire someone based on a test, pre-employment test. And if it was that simple, everybody would just test people and not talk to people. So you really need to be curious about them as a person and then their technical skills. And there are some questions in the handout that you can ask. Okay, so let's talk about a few things right away that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about some basic policies, some advice about don't hurry up and hire, spend time training people, and I don't mean training them like sending them to Dartmouth or Harvard, but giving them some on-the-job training. Let them read some of the work that you've been doing, show them some of the storyboards, bring him to a client, whatever it is. Make sure that he or she gets a chance to really kind of understand what the business is all about. And always give feedback of some kind, performance feedback. It doesn't have to be written and formal and 1 to 5. It just needs to be you're doing great, or here's where you got to pick up, or here's where you have to slow down. Or they can't get enough feedback in early stage companies because things are moving so fast that you might miss something if you wait 6 months to give the feedback. And then be clear on the compensation and benefit offerings. If at that point you're in a position where you can't offer benefits and offer, retirement plans or 401ks, that's fine. Just tell them that you can't. And then eventually they'll get there. And so to pay base salary is completely fine. You're not obligated to offer the benefits. Where you're obligated is if you offer them to me, you have to offer them to Larry. So just can't just give me benefits and not give Larry benefits. That's when you get obligated, okay? And we could talk a little bit about that too. So those would be the highlights of what we're gonna talk about. So think back when you first got your supervisory job or your job as the president or CEO of your company. Do you remember where you were and what was going through your mind, and if you were freaked out or scared, or what was your first day like? Do you remember? Anybody want to share? Ooh, everybody's so quiet. Yes, Jess.
Well, I quit a very stable job to try to launch this company.
Okay.
And I remember waking up that first Monday thinking that I was in control of all of my time, which was both thrilling and really daunting.
Yeah.
Because you have to create your own schedule, and it's a lot of time to manage effectively.
Mm-hmm. So you found yourself scheduling your time and planning things out, and
Yeah, I'm still working on best ways to do that.
Okay, good.
I remember I started by trying to work out blocks of time, but that very quickly got eroded when somebody called and wanted to schedule a meeting. And it was like, oh, I was supposed to be exercising during that time.
block,
I
yes.
guess that's not going to work.
Right.
So I'm still kind of working through the best way to do that.
Okay. And the reason why I asked is because you guys are kind of finding your own way as people in charge of businesses or launching businesses or not even at the launch stage. But you're kind of finding your own way. And so when you start to bring people in, they've got to find their way too. And it's perfectly okay to talk about the culture, what it's like to, how you guys like to work, partnership, collaboration, open communication. I don't mean to sound like IBM culture, but just enough culture about the entrepreneurialness and the risks that you've taken. And the issue of time. People work all the time, people have phones, they're always connected. So whatever the company culture is, you want to make sure you share that. And that's really important. And just recognize the fact that everyone's going to respond to things differently. And so how are you going to find out if somebody's committed? That's a little harder of a question, but we'll talk about that a little in a few minutes. Let me just get through the standard employment laws, and there's only 3 slides, just the ones to get you in trouble. These aren't every law that's on the book. These are just the ones to get you in trouble. So meaning that the Equal Employment Opportunity in the Department of Labor, the US government, talks about discrimination in hiring and firing, in training, in promoting, in disciplining, in any work decision that you make based on race, color, gender, national origin, religion, age, and disability. Now there are some other ones that are coming on the list as far as protected groups, but these are the federal statutes that I'm giving you now. So if you can at least maintain the federal statutes, then you'll probably be good with the state or the city or the county. And all employers, unions, joint labor management committees, government agencies, private businesses need to comply. The trick is for you guys, it's where you jump in the mix. And so if you have 1 employee, we'll talk about what that looks like versus 50. 50 is the big magical number. When number 50 employee hits, then lots of other triggers get pulled. And by then, you'll have a payroll company, you'll have someone to help you with your interim HR work, you'll have someone doing your accounting. It'll be more systematic by then. So let me talk about a little bit about equal pay. That just means that it requires you guys to pay equally. And it's usually the male-female equal. And when it doesn't mean the same, it means, again, if you have 2 females, you can't pay one $10 an hour and one $50 an hour. Now, you can, but if they find out, and somehow people find out, and they question you, you just need to, now if one has a PhD and 50 years of experience, that's why you'd pay the $50. And if one doesn't have a PhD or just got out of grad school and has a year experience, that's why you'd pay that. But when we talk about it, we really mean when we're in giant companies with thousands of hourly workers, that we want to make sure we pay people equally and fairly, not the same amount of money. Yeah, Justin.
What if you want to specifically promote job opportunities for people with physical disabilities or veterans that might not be able to go to an office? Is that discrimination when you're promoting a job and saying to a certain group of people, hey, if you have a physical disability but seek employment, we have flexible work opportunities?
So it's an interesting question. It is a little bit on discriminatory border because you're shutting out everybody else. That's how the government would look at it. It would be just the opposite if you didn't want anybody with a disability or you didn't want any green people, and saying, I'm only looking for purple people. So anytime or I only want people that speak Spanish, or only want people that speak Greek. Anytime you put a parameter around it, and you can't give a business justification, like in the airlines, when the flight attendants have to be a certain weight requirement and height and all of us, and pilots have to be physically fit and pass tests. That's because they're carrying thousands of passengers every week in some cases, and we want to make sure that they're physically fit and nobody's going to have a heart attack in the cockpit. And so if we can justify or rationalize why, then it's a little bit easier to do. But I wouldn't worry yet. You guys are small enough right now. The Department of Labor isn't going to come to you and say, Justin, I saw that you put an ad in the paper and you're only looking for green people. I mean, they're not going to do that. They're going to go to big companies, Transamerica, big companies if they saw that, and say, hey, deep pockets, we're going to see if what we can do to rile up some potential lawsuits or whatever. So I wouldn't worry about it, but I will tell you from a general perspective, anytime you target one specific group, even if you're thinking you're helping with the EEO codes, it's considered potentially some level of discrimination. It's just because you're shutting out other people. That's how the Department of Labor looks at it. Civil Rights Act of 1965 prohibits discrimination on the basis of all those categories that we talked about. Again, there's an Age Discrimination Act that came out in 67 that says, look, if you're 40 or older, you're protected by the Older Worker Protection Act or the Age Discrimination Act. It just means you can't go when you get to 150 people and say, you know what, I'm going to fire all the people over 40. You can't do that, okay? Well, you can, but there's a risk there. So whatever you do that kind of violates these, there's a risk, obviously, that comes along with it. Then the Equal Employment Act got a little stronger, and it started to talk more about people in government agencies and higher ed, and all employees and employers are really responsible for any acts of discrimination under the EEOC law. Then there's the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, and I think these are just basic ones. There have been recent case law that has changed some of these, but they haven't lessened them. They've only made them more strict. So this just broadens the definition of sex discrimination to include women who are pregnant. So I had a case not that long ago where an owner of a small business, they have 35 people, hired a woman who was pregnant. She didn't disclose that she was pregnant. She was from her country. She wore kind of more of a very elegant satin cloak-like dress, so you couldn't tell that she was pregnant. And so they hired her, and then in 6 weeks, they figured out she was pregnant, and the owner just like completely became unglued and called me up and said, you know, she should have said to us, and you don't have to disclose it. You absolutely don't have to disclose it. And so I told him, you know, it's people like you, that's why we have these laws, because like you're like nuts. You know, I mean, she isn't going to do anything. And the reason why owners of businesses freak out is because why? Why do you think they freak out?
Maybe she's not going to be working.
Yeah, maybe she won't come back. We just trained her. Now she's going on leave for 2 months. So it's more of a selfish thing. It's not because you're trying to discriminate against pregnant women. It's really because of a workflow issue. But I'm here to tell you that it is what it is. And she is one of our rock stars. She's a PhD research scientist. She's great. And she managed everything flawlessly. She was out for 6 weeks. She never even knew it. She kept up with her emails. It was just amazing. So it really is depending upon the person in a lot of instances. But you obviously can discriminate against someone who is pregnant. Here's some of the compliance issues that you need to kind of focus on, and it's in your handout, so you don't have to write it down. So any of the EEOC laws, number one employee, you're on the hook for. Any discrimination of any kind. Any Consumer Credit Protection Act, if you're going to do a background check on somebody and you're working in a financial organization and you want to do a credit check to see if they write bad checks or if that you need to get their permission. And when you've got one person, you've got to get their permission. So any background check company you work for will have a consent form for the applicant to sign. Any polygraph protection, so you can't record people without them knowing that you're recording them. That's kind of just standard, I think, somewhat common sense. Any retirement plan, if the company offers benefits, it's definitely important for you just to get the certification that it is it meets the standards of the Federal Employee Retirement Income Security Act. And if you work with a financial advisor, they'll do that for you. You don't have to do it. But just to know that the benefits are protected, which really just protects the benefits and the money that are in those accounts. Equal pay, remember making sure that you pay people as fairly as you can. Fair credit reporting, again, talks about background checks, and then the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is the issue of overtime. And I wouldn't worry about it for a contractor, because you're not going to pay a contractor overtime. Usually pay them by the hour. So when you hire your first employee, if they're an hourly worker, then you say you need them 30 hours a week and they're working 38 hours a week, then those 8 hours usually paid at time and a half. I'm assuming that you might not have a full 40-hour week. Would you guys hire someone for a full 40 hours?
More like 80 hours.
Okay, well, if it's 80 hours, then they'll definitely be eligible for overtime. Okay, so if you offer benefits, there's the HIPAA regulation that just talks about confidentiality, that people just can't call and say, oh, can you tell me what Kathy's, she went to the doctor, can you tell me what happened? Those are just laws to protect both you and the employee. Any immigration issues, any issues under Homeland Security, making sure people have their right papers to work in the states or in the country is real important. So you want to make sure that you have all the paperwork for them to fill out their I-9s. And then the National Labor Relations Board, if you have a union, which I wouldn't worry about for you guys right now, any occupational health and safety laws so that nobody trips over open drawers or you don't have an accident in your office. And then the Uniform Services Employment Reemployment Act, which you don't have to worry about, hiring veterans and hiring veterans to come into your shop, and that you can't discriminate against hiring veterans. So those are just, they sound scary and daunting. Don't let them. Just to know that when you have 1 to 14 employees, that's kind of when some of the common sense laws start to come into play. And then there are more statutes, the American with Disability Act, and then when you get to 20 to 49 people, you have to worry about the Age Discrimination Act, and then at 50 people or more, you would have to tell the government every quarter who's on your staff, what their EEO code is, how long they've been there, their gender. It starts to get a little bit involved. But at this particular point, between 20 and 49, you're starting to work with an HR consultant, you're starting to work with a finance consultant, you have somebody doing your payroll, they understand the payroll taxes. You don't have to worry about that, you just have to make sure that the people that you hire are doing the right thing. And then obviously 100 or more, anytime, this is an act that was put into play in the late 80s because a lot of factories were closing and they wouldn't give any notice to the people, so the people would come to work and then they'd have no job. Like hundreds of people would be out of work, would devastate the town, devastate the community. So there's a law that says if you're gonna let go 50 people, I think it's 50 people or more, you need to make sure that you give them a notification period. So you would give them a 6 weeks notification period saying in 8 weeks, you're not gonna have a job. It's a little dicey. Usually people pay people and they pay that notice. They don't have them working there if it's a confidential situation. So it's a little tricky. But again, if you're at that level, you're working with lawyers, you're working with HR managers, they'll help you through all that. So anything that's people related, just keep an extra ear open because that's when things get a little dicey. And why do you want to comply? Because you want to be able to attract good people. You want to be able to make sure that you minimize any litigation expense. You want to make sure that any compliance at the outset means fewer problems. So if you do it right in the beginning, then at the end, it's going to also be right. And so when you hire one person and then 5 months later you hire someone else and you don't fix the mistakes that you feel like you made with the first one, then you're going to have mistakes when you hire the 50th and 60th person too. And then obviously there's an integrity issue to make sure you do the right thing. And that really relates to the recruiting piece. A lot of my small companies say, how many policies do I have to have, Kathy G? Do I need a phone book of, what they can and cannot do? So here are 10 basic policies. All right, people need to know what they're supposed to do. So there needs to be a job description. And there's some samples in there on how to write job descriptions. People need to know what their leave policy is. Do you have a leave policy? Is there a vacation, sick, personal, whatever it might be? Is it 4 days? Is it 10 days? How do I take it? Do I get all the 10 days up front, or do they accrue over 12 months? So however you guys want to work it, you just need to be able to tell people so they know how to take it. Attendance policies, absences and lateness policies. Tell them what your hours of operations are. Tell them that you're considered late if you show up at 9 o'clock if we're supposed to be here at 8. Now I know a lot of startups, people are working at midnight and doing crazy hours, and the 8 to 5 is usually not an issue. But here's what happens. When you do have one that is an issue, how do you document it or how do you talk about it? So you should have some core hours where everybody's working together as best they can between, I don't know, pick times, 11 and 2 or 11 and 3. And then if they want to work from home or in the morning before they get here, you just want to make sure people know what the working hours are. And if you have an attendance and lateness policy, people need to know what that means. Like, could I lose my job if I'm late 3 days in a row? Or if you just don't show up and you don't show up for 3 days, you're probably going to just write me a letter if you've tried to get a hold of me and you don't know where I am that says you've assumed I quit when someone just abandons their job like that. And so again, those are some of the tricks that you learn moving forward when you start hiring, the 8th, 9th, and 10th person. The inclement weather policy, different. You don't need something that covers 3 shifts, 24 hours a day, 8 days a week. You just need to say, look, if it's snowing, work from home if you can work from home. Just don't not work. And so whatever the inclement weather policy is, I would just make sure they knew what it was. You can actually do this in like 2 sheets of paper. You don't need a handbook that's 15 pages long. Just make sure you write notes about what each of these policies mean to you. Any conflicts of interest, any non-disclosure agreements that people have to sign, make sure they sign them up front, whether it's in part of their contract or it's an addendum to their offer letter. Any anti-discrimination or anti-harassment policies, you want to make sure you say, look, we don't harass people here. This is an open, free, hostile-free work environment, and that's the way we like to keep it. And so people just need to know that they can't be yelling at people and throwing things and stuff like that. And then any issues around drug-free workplace, whether you do pre-employment drug testing. In some medical companies I have, we do post-accident drug testing. So if you need to do drug testing because you have the business that you're in, you just need to let people know. If you're in transportation, they do random drug tests to make sure that people are not using drugs while they're driving 65 high school kids back and forth from home to school. And then any OSHA or safety regulations. And that usually comes into my scientific companies when they're working with radioactive stuff and God forbid somebody could get burned or anything like that. Okay? Any questions around the policies? Don't make them, don't freak out about it. Don't make it so upsetting that you can't get it straight. Figure out how you want to work it. Write a couple of sentences, put it in 2 sheets of paper, give it to the person that you hire. Okay, you're not required to even give a handout as an employee handbook. You just want to do it so that people understand what the rules are. And it's a great way to orient them too. Don't hurry up and hire. If you have competition, know your competition. If you have anything in your gut that's telling you, maybe I shouldn't hire this person, don't do it. Trust your gut whenever you can. Because when you hurry up and hire, you usually make a mistake. And not you personally, but usually mistakes happen. And so when they say, well, the guy across the street is offering me $20 an hour and you're only offering me 10, know what the market value is of that particular function. And so you need to know what your competition is. I have a client right now, and we're getting poached. One of their competitors has taken their prime people, and they're like freaking out because they can't meet. They're paying them tons of money to come. So my advice to them was, you come up with a strategy. Once they can't come, they can't pay all that money. Eventually, they're going to run out of money. So we have to figure out how to get them back, because we can't even meet the competition's pay. Know the marketplace. Know what makes your company great. Talk about the passion, what motivates you, your sense of ownership, why you get out of bed in the morning. Get that passion and that culture in your company and make sure people share the same passion. And so when you ask one of the questions, Ryan, like, what are you passionate about? And if they say they don't have anything that they're passionate about, and some people don't, you got to figure out if that's somebody that you want to hire. Okay. If they say I'm passionate about reading or being with my kids or riding bikes or whatever, at least they've got some passion in them and they know how that's supposed to work. And so know some recruiting tips. Know about what's going to motivate that person to say yes to the job. Is it the hours? Is it the flexibility? Is it the money? Is it all of it? 'Cause a lot of times people don't even care about the benefits. They just want to know they have flexibility and that they're working in a meaningful company and they're making a contribution. So figure out what you think is going to be important to the candidate. When we talk about know your competition, do your homework, develop relationships with colleges. Here's some recruiting tips here. Identify where potential employees seek opportunities. They're not necessarily looking in the Washington Post or the Baltimore Sun. They're just not. The folks that you are hiring probably looking at social media, Craigslist, places like that. And then recognize what motivates employees to join your company. And I'm assuming you've got a profile of people that you want to hire. Up and coming, technologically advanced, being able to write code, being very creative, innovative, inspirational. Those are the things that you're looking for when you're hiring folks. Here's about knowing the marketplace. Here's the biggest one. I want to, 2 of them. Stay ahead of the curve and read the newspaper, especially on Sunday. Now you might say that's crazy. There are Sunday pullouts of job ads. There are people that still look at the paper. Okay, don't look at the paper to see what the ads look like. See who's looking to hire people. Figure out if maybe some companies downsized, in the business section of the paper. Maybe you can take someone from the company. Do whatever you can to get your intel on what's happening in the marketplace when you're looking for people, especially technology people. Really know what makes your company great. Make sure your business objectives are clarified. And I know just working here at the ETC, a lot of that stuff you had to do. You had to have a business plan, right? People had to kind of know what your business model was. And so make sure people understand what the business model is. And if there's a way for you to link the business to the greater good, whether it's students, whether it's education, whether it's any, client management systems, whatever it is, real estate, you just want to be able to link it. If someone has passion around college grads, that's probably somebody you'd want on your staff, okay? Or someone who's been a student for their whole life and appreciates the college, the whole collegial thing. That might be somebody you want to have on your staff. So kind of understand and know how the business links to the greater good. And then understand the company benefits. Like I said, be honest with people. I have a startup right now. They're looking to recruit somebody. She gets $6,000 a year in the company she's at right now for tuition reimbursement. My client doesn't have tuition reimbursement. He's too small. He's at the mercy of the NIH giving him grants. And so there is a policy. It's just turned off right now. And I was honest with her as a candidate. And she said, thanks for being honest. Because what would have happened is we would have hired her. Then she would have found out. She probably wouldn't have asked. She would have found out that there is no tuition reimbursement policy, and she may have quit. Or she may have gone back to her old company. So you just need to be honest with people at the get-go. Some other recruiting tips, know that you're always looking for talent. That should be a 24/7. You should always have your business card. You should always, if you're out at a bar or you're out at dinner or you're at an organized industry event, always have business cards. Always say you're looking for people, even if you're not, because you want to cultivate that pipeline. And do what you can to collect business cards, resumes, scan them in your computers, whatever, just to keep a database. So when you're ready, you've got some contacts. So always know that you're looking for people. Don't lose a candidate for 50 cents or a title. It's kind of a crazy bullet there, but the point of that is I have so many clients that say, I only can pay $55,000, and the person's looking for 56. And then we spend like 6 weeks trying to figure out if we can pay the extra $1,000, and we've lost the person. It's a crazy example, but it happens all the time. So just be honest with yourself. If 55 is really the drop dead top line, and you can't go $1 over, then just know that. And don't entertain somebody who's making 65, because you'll be disappointed and they'll be disappointed. Okay, so really kind of know what your budget is. Don't let resumes sit. If you are actively looking, kind of scan through those resumes as soon as you get them. The first 2 or 3, and Craigslist is really good. Biospace is really good. There's some other technical job descriptions, job postings, services that are really good. They might be $500 for 30 or 45 days. It's kind of cheap. When the resumes start coming in, definitely go through them and see if you see anybody in there that you would want to hire. Usually the first couple of days, there's a flurry of people that you'd want to hire. When it starts to get into the 15th to 20th day, the energy starts to kind of wane a little. So if you do put the ad in on an online posting site, make sure you look at those resumes right away. Just scan them. When you actually hire your staff, you want to make sure that you welcome them, that they feel, and it says here, provide an effective orientation program. Yeah, I'm not asking you to sit there and spend $10,000 on, orientation materials. I mean, make sure you have an agenda. You have a 30, 60, 90-day expectation. In 30 days, we expect you to know this. In 60 days, we expect you to know that. And in 90 days, we expect you to know this. Just so everybody's level set. It could be something as simple as that. And as I said, do whatever you can. Give them reading materials, publications, send them to an industry, local conference, send them to a client. Whatever you need them to do to orient themselves, just have a plan for them. And then tell them how they're going to get reviewed. And I don't mean a scary performance evaluation system. I mean, if I work for Ryan, how is he going to give me feedback? How do I know how I'm doing? And so Ryan's going to say, every 2 weeks I'm going to ask you, how you doing? And I got this, and I think it should look like that. And you need to develop a partnership with the folks that you hire. Again, nothing scary as far as figuring out rating systems. Just be able to give me the feedback as we go. Check in daily with new employees. Don't just give them the keys to the building and tell them where to park and don't talk to them for 10 days. You really need to kind of check in with them 2 or 3 times a day, especially if they're working on something that they've never worked on before. And then provide any technical training when possible. Anybody have any questions on this part? This sounds kind of simple, but in my larger clients, this is where the wheels fall off the wagon. They spend all this money, they hire search firms to find people, and then they give them the keys, the fob, and the parking garage swipe card, and then the person never sees their supervisor. And that's when the relationship falls apart. And so this is actually a very important piece of your bringing people into your companies. And again, you have to figure out where you are in your own mindset. You don't need the Cadillac, but you need something to kind of get it going, moving forward. Talk about before, it's funny, even though people know they're working for small companies, they really do want to know how you're going to evaluate their work. They kind of want to know that. And so spending a few minutes thinking about 3 things: their overall performance, how they get their work done, reflect on what they did last year, and then set goals for next year. It's as simple as that. It could be on a simple Word document. This isn't anything that has to be 9 pages with 50 competencies. That's not what you're looking for. You're just looking to give them enough information so that they feel good about the work they do, or if they need to be put on track again or retreaded, you know how to do that. They're not surprised when you give them that feedback. Anybody have any questions about performance feedback? This is usually where owners of companies really get wrapped around the axle because they feel it has to be a very involved system, and it doesn't. It just has to be enough to give them overall performance feedback, reflect on what they did, and set goals for next year. Okay, it's that clear. Be clear on the compensation and benefits offerings. Again, if you have minimal funds, just be honest with them. Say, look, my plan is to have a 401k plan in 2017. My plan is to have an employee stock option program in 2020, whatever the number is. Or in the fall of 2013, wherever you are in your stage of your development. Be careful of job titles. Everybody wants to be a chief of this and a chief of that and an executive of this and a VP of that. Don't be so willing to hand out some of those chief founder titles because you can't take them back. 10 years from now, 10 months from now, 10 weeks from now, when you hire someone else, then they're going to want a chief title. And then you're going to have all VPs and nobody's doing the work. Okay, or they don't think I'm a VP, why should I do that? So be careful how you hand out titles. It really does matter. And that's something that you don't want everybody to be a president and co-president and co-owner and everything else. So just make sure you think through the titles. We talked about the market. Keep an eye on internal equity. So when you're at the 20, 25 person mark, here's what's going to happen. It might be 3 years later, and that same IT person that you hired 3 years earlier was making 65, but now you have to pay 70. Okay? Make sure the people that are inside, you do the best you can to bring them up to the market rate, because then they're going to get a job across the street making 72. And then there goes all your institutional knowledge right out the window. And so just know that we call that compression, that there's compensation compression usually when we're hiring lots of people in one specific position. And look at the salary as it relates to length of service. Again, education, what's their expertise, how long have they been doing something, did they just start learning how to write code, have they been writing code for 10 years, what's their deal before you decide to make a package. And ask them how much they're making. It's perfectly okay for you to ask them that. I have clients that ask people for a copy of their W-2s. I wouldn't necessarily do that because I feel like the person might think they're not being honest, or they think you're not being honest with them. But there are some of my clients that do ask for copies of W-2s, just to see, are they really making 80 or are they only making 60? Find out what's important to them. Is it the money that's important to them, the time off that's important to them, what's important to them, until you can figure out, what your groove is. There is no exact science to this benefits and compensation piece. You guys have to feel your way around. It's all related to budget. It's all related to income, early access clients that might be paying you money. Whatever you can do to balance your numbers, that really dictates what you can pay. And then anything around basic benefit offerings. So when you get to the point where you do want to offer dental, health and welfare, meaning HSAs, the health spending accounts, or dependent care for children, like you can put pre-tax money aside for daycare, any type of health and welfare benefits you want to offer, dental, paid time off, those are usually the basic ones. And then they get a little bit more ratcheted up when it comes to giving people off for community service days or volunteering, and if who wants to have a gym membership, or if there's parking that you could pay, or subsidizing a Metro card, or whatever it might be for transportation. And then this whole retirement income piece for any 401ks or any IRAs that you want to offer. And at that point, again, your financial advisor has to help you with that. Don't try to sit there and figure that out. One of my smaller clients, we have an issue right now, and it's an employee relations issue. And I know the right answer, and I've told the owner, this is what you need to do, but I'm a little worried, he's a little worried, this person's been there a long time, she could be a bit of a wild card. I said, look, it pays to call the lawyers. Spend the $250 for the half an hour and get the consult. And so he agreed. So use your resources when you can. Just don't shoot from the hip. And this company is an established company. They're just really small, and they're a little leery, and I'm a little leery, and I can perfectly understand why they're a little worried. And so we're going to talk to the lawyers on Monday, and I'm sure they'll agree with what we decided, but he'll feel a lot better. So just use your resources. Okay, so that was kind of all I had to say, a lot up front. Tell me what resonates with you, what doesn't make sense, what's still unfinished, and then I'm going to go through the list again to make sure I covered everyone's interest. Yes, Jess?
So I'm about to interview a couple people
Okay.
for unpaid internships.
Okay.
Do you have any suggestions for how to make that an attractive offer?
So do they know it's unpaid?
Yeah.
And are they connected with their school? Is it connected with their schoolwork?
It's not connected with their schoolwork, but it's through a school group. It's like the entrepreneurship, they're in the entrepreneurship club.
Cool.
So it's
All
people
right.
who have a demonstrated interest
Cool.
in startups.
Okay. So well, first of all, this building's a cool building.
Yeah.
And so you have a great location. And I would play up the coolness part. You're dealing with a
Yeah.
younger worker,
Yeah.
and see what they can do to maybe apply some of the things that they've learned in school to work, so they can see the application
Yeah.
and give them a chance, and offer to kind of mentor them and give them a chance to kind of practice some of the things they've learned. And then, I don't know if they can write a paper, or if you have to sign some document that they showed some sort of proficiency in something. But try to see what you could do to engage them. Yeah, absolutely engage them. Good question. Yes, Ryan?
When you're taking in applications and interviewing, what's been your experience with following up with their references and how to get the real picture of who this person is and how well they performed in the past?
Yeah.
I mean, especially like I've had experience where I've called references and, that's who they want you to speak with. How do you get to the real, get
Okay.
the real story?
So good questions. And it's not an easy answer. Employers are very leery giving you the real story. So if you talk to a previous supervisor, they're told by their HR people, name, rank, and serial number. Verify the fact, yes, Joe worked here, yes, he worked from May to September, and yes, he made $10 an hour. Would you rehire Joe? We can't talk about rehire. That's what their HR people tell them what they can't do. And the reason why is because they may say something that you then say, uh-oh, don't hire me, and it might not have been true. Not that they lied, but it just might not have fit in the whole scheme of things. And it might not have been something that bugged you. What bugs you as an owner might not bug me as an owner. And it's like to say the person wants to work from home, you say, okay, let him work from home. I don't have any office space. So it's hard. So you're not going to get the real answer from a reference. That's the first thing. The second thing is the best you can do is ask for a supervisory reference, not a personal reference. So a professional previous supervisor, or the doctor in the program or the graduate program who's monitoring their thesis work, or somebody in that if they're working in their local church, so the minister of the church. Whatever you can do to get some of that leadership perspective, you can certainly try to get it. You just don't know if they're going to be open to giving it to you. That's all. And they're not legally obligated. The only time they're legally obligated is if, God forbid, there's an issue where there could be something called a negligent hire, which means that I know that Joe or Jane has an alcohol problem. I work in a transportation industry. We actually let Joe or Jane go. Now Joe or Jane showed up in another transportation company, and now I get a phone call for a reference. I can't, in all good consciousness, put Joe or Jane behind that wheel if I know that they have a drug or alcohol issue. And I tell them what happened because I'm worried about hiring someone who could potentially bring danger to themselves, the clients, or the organization. Then it's on me as the manager. But those are rare cases. The best you can do is, and I know it sounds crazy, is go with your gut. You got to learn how to start trusting your gut. And so I'm sure everyone around this table at once before, when they decided to do something and then it didn't go well, what do you guys say? I should have listened to my intuition. Most of us say that. And so don't ignore your gut. Does that help a little?
Yeah, just trying to come up
Do
with
the
some
best you
words.
can.
Yeah.
Right. Do the best you can. So in your handout, let me just show you real quick. In this handout here, which is there's a sample evaluation, there's even a sample reference check form, some of the questions that you can answer. There's some thanks but no thanks letters for people that you did interview and it didn't work. There's a sample job description, how that works. There's a couple of sample policies in here. And I thought we had some sample interview questions.
You know what? I think we may have printed.
You may have it?
But
Okay.
I'll upload those documents to our Google Slides so you can.
So you see it, and there
Yeah,
are
yeah.
some
That'd be
sample
great. Thank you.
questions. Yeah, there are some sample questions. So how do you learn about how the applicant regards their current or past positions? How do you learn about how the applicant relates to people they work with? Here's some open-ended questions. Please share with us a situation that. Please tell us a time when. If they can't answer the questions, don't hire them. Okay? And these are all the non-technical ones. Okay, project management questions. And I think I even have the do not ask question list. Yes, here's keeping interviews legal. So don't ask me if I'm married. Don't ask me if I have a car. How do I plan to get to work? Don't ask me where I live. Don't ask me anything about how old I am or if I've had any convictions. All those things you really legally cannot ask. Okay, in an interview. Now, to be honest with you, don't ask me if I'm disabled, or if English is my first language, or anything that's personal is off the table. Okay, if you can't figure it out face to face in the interview, then you cannot ask it. You're just gonna have to again go with your gut. So there are some samples in here. I would take a quick look at it when Celia puts it up on the site. Yes, Justin.
I'm looking through one of the samples in here, the creating job descriptions, which I always find it's so hard to do.
Yeah, it's hard to do.
Do you find that people often make it too complicated?
Yes.
And that really it should just be like 3 things, and then the rest is kind of implied if the person has any idea how to do that job, they would already know the rest?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, sometimes I read the job descriptions for things that I know, and I'm like, I don't know what 80% of the stuff on there is because of the way it's worded. It just
Yep.
doesn't seem
Yep.
familiar.
I don't overcomplicate it. And here's a sounds like a contradictory answer, but don't assume that they get it either.
Okay.
So you've got to be as explicit as you can. I don't know too many jobs where 3 bullets on a page would do it for me.
Right.
Even in a receptionist position, or in an admin secretarial position, or in some road position, somebody putting on tires, in a manufacturing shop. But I wouldn't have 50 things on there either. I would have a good 10, 5 to 7, 8 to 10 actual duties that I'm going to be doing pretty frequently, and I think that's clear enough. Absolutely. I absolutely agree that, now there are some companies that do need a little bit more complicated. If they do have American with Disabilities complications, if they have lifting 50 pounds or more,
Right.
if they've got to move a wheelchair, yeah, absolutely, those have become a little bit more complicated. But for the work that you guys are doing, I'm thinking basic job descriptions would be perfectly fine.
No government job descriptions.
Yeah, no government job descriptions with KSAs and whatever else they do. And then they wonder why
Are
they
those long?
can't.
Are those long?
They could be
USA job.
3 or 4 pages. They could be.
They're ridiculously long.
Well, we thought all the people were short attention spans like me. That would make it
And
past the
most of
first
the
half
things,
page.
I think what they're doing now is they're computerizing some of these things, and they're looking for certain keywords in your resume, so you can be a perfect applicant, but if you're not using the correct keywords, your resume never gets seen at all.
Yeah, which is a shame.
Yeah,
Which is an absolute shame.
So you gotta,
it's a horrible
you have to
process.
optimize your resume.
Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah,
exactly right.
You've got to put all the hot words in there.
Yeah. so
Otherwise, you might get
before-
looked at.
You can't do it. So if someone at the NIH wanted to hire you on a personal reference, said, man, I really like this guy, they can't do that anymore.
Correct.
You have to go apply for the job,
Right.
Yeah.
which is,
Yeah, it makes it really hard.
But they still do it, but they'll like coach you and say, put this in your resume.
yeah. It's still, it's fairly complicated now.
Well, and in the NIH, I mean, they're not really hiring a lot of GS workers right now. A lot of the people they hire are contractors through Lockheed Martin or Teletemps or someplace else. They're not just handing out GS grades anymore.
Have you
Yes.
had any experience hiring technical folks, programmers,
Mhm.
software architect?
Mhm.
What's been like your experience with that? How's it different than hiring other employees?
I like to give them a sample, like a writing sample. If you're hiring someone to do marketing and you want to make sure they can write, give them a writing sample. Get them a laptop somewhere, give them something to write about, and have them go write it, and then bring it to you. Have them write a Java code sample. Have them write something for you. Write a code for something, or explain how they would write the code. If you don't have them do it at the office or wherever you're interviewing them, somebody else can write the code. So you won't know if it's from them. Have them share with you code that they've written, if they can, code that they've written in another life, in another job. Ask about how they go about writing the code. Do they just sit and start writing, or do they plan it out, and do they have, timetables? Like, how do they do that? And so it's all about how they work. And I do think that the technology folks are a little easier, like the writing example folks, that you could actually get people to write something for you. Good question. Okay, let me do real quick. Paperwork for the first hire. We didn't talk about paperwork per se, but you definitely go online, go on the websites for like the local tax forms and the federal forms. It's real easy. It's really just payroll tax information. And make sure they have their I-9 spelled out, which gives you the clue that they have all the paperwork to work in the country. That's all that means. And short of those two things and an offer letter that they sign, I think you're good to go. I wouldn't do overkill with any of the new hire paperwork. What's important when you talk about going from 0 to 10? We talked about some of those things. What's important? Make sure you do have some policies. Make sure you do have some job descriptions. Make sure people do know what the rules of the road are, so that you're not running around trying to explain it as they go. Interviewing and recruiting techniques. We talked a little bit about recruit all the time, 24/7. Recruit where people hang out. Don't put something in the BaltimoreSun.com if nobody's reading the newspaper. You know, go to an industry website. Go to Craigslist. Go where people are looking. People from the profile that you want them to have, where they're looking. Job posting tips. What you include, again, not a whole laundry list of things to do, but give a little description of your company, talk about the 3 or 4 things that the job requires, and then the qualifications. You want somebody to be certified, have a college degree, have 2 or 3 years experience, whatever that is. It doesn't have to be more than 10, 12 lines. Because to your point, Justin, no one's gonna read all that. They're absolutely not gonna read all that. And then, how do you retain the talent? Usually, in your type of industry, it's interesting work. They stay because they like the work, or they like the culture of the company, or they like the flexibility. So it's usually about interesting work. And so the longer you can keep them interested, the longer they'll stay. And of course, we have here bonus payments to talent. That also helps. It gives you a little bit of a golden handcuff. Even in a contractor, you might say, look, if you can get this milestone met in 30 days versus 45, I'll pay you $500 on top of your hourly rate. You know, if you're under the gun and you need something done, say if you can get it done in 30 days rather than 60 days, I'll give you $1,000. You know, depending upon what it is. So absolutely use the payouts for bonuses to your advantage. Don't say 10% of the salary or 10% of what. Actually give them a number. And it's sign it to a milestone, so there's some rational connections there. So if they don't complete it, and you look at the milestone and they didn't complete it, you could say that's why you didn't get the $500. You know, don't leave it up to being open-ended. Make sure it's real tight. And then, how do you know if they're really committed to the company? You know, sometimes it's a crapshoot. Sometimes, like you have the right idea, Ryan. If you could test drive somebody, absolutely. Which is why temp agencies are real popular these days, right? Because if you don't like the temp, you send them back. You're not obligated to keep them. Now, you can't ask someone to test drive. You can't test drive someone who's got a job, who's making a significant amount of money, just to see, and then say, you know, I'm only going to give them 30 days, and then I'm going to let them go, because then that's probably not fair. And it probably wouldn't be honest either. So you can't do that. But if someone's out of work or looking for work and they're looking to make some money, absolutely you can test drive them. You know, bring them in 30, 45 days. Absolutely.
What do you think is the best place to go about finding coders? Because I mean, that's pretty much what we go to need at least.
So let me ask you, where do coders, seriously, where do they hang out? They hang out on the web?
I can help you with that. I just got an email from somebody who works at Stack Overflow, and they just started a new job board function.
So
Okay.
I got the email. It was addressed to you though. And it said to me, it said, "Dear John, you just started employment."
Okay.
There's a new meeting. Yeah, from Stack Overflow.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've hired software developers. Most of the work I did at Solera, we were like the largest startup at the turn of the century. We hired hundreds of guys that wrote code, guys, men or women, and it was easy to find because in the early 2000s, late 90s, there were lots of people milling around. Now I guess everyone's back into a nice soft spot, so you might have to actually go fish somebody out of somewhere. So if you know that ABC company really does a great job training their coders and they're good at what they do and they have a good work ethic, you might have to go poach. You might actually have to poach, yeah.
Sorry, you may have mentioned it. What do you think about non-competes for startups? I mean, especially if they're like programmers and they're like, very, it's hard to find in this area especially. So people are just like trying to attract other companies' coders. For a startup especially, what do you think about non-competes? Is
I
it
think
something?
non-competes really protect you guys. I would definitely have people sign them.
So it's important so that they couldn't, my competition, they couldn't just change it.
Correct. And they just need to know that's part of the employment agreement at the time of hire. They need to understand. And again, it doesn't have to be a complicated document that's got 9 pages with 10 exhibits, okay? A lawyer could help you write one that's rational and absolutely says that you cannot. And I have a company right now where we've got some trademarks and we've got some intellectual property and that's all locked down in their non-disclosure.
Or like they usually give like a year.
Yeah, there's a timeline
And
on how long it can be, absolutely. You can't restrain somebody's trade. You can't say you can never again work for a pharmaceutical company.
yeah.
Yeah, but you can certainly give it a timeline.
Including that, maybe, I'm sure you have some samples on that too, but including that, the work that the programmers are gonna do, whatever they do belongs to the company.
Absolutely.
So they cannot take them.
Absolutely, and that's part of the confidentiality, intellectual property, proprietary information. So even if you have contractors that work for you, I would have them sign a non-disclosure or incorporate that confidentiality agreement in the contract. Yeah, do whatever, be selfish, this is your business. Do what you can do to lock down your property, intellectual property. You in many cases, you might not be making machines. So it's not like you can put your name on there and someone just can't take it. Look at all the issues between Samsung and Apple. And I'm sure everything's locked down between those two companies and look at all the issues. Who came up with the tablet first, who had the style, it's crazy. Every week there's some other news about who's suing who for the stealing technology. And so it's that easy. People can steal technology, it's that easy. So do the best you can to lock yourself down. Even for me, my corporate nanny's trademarked. And I've paid lawyers lots of money to get the trademark so that someone doesn't come and take the name. And I'm pretty protective of that name. And so I kind of make sure that every couple of years I re-up and make sure that all my paperwork is in order because I want to keep it. And so do the best you can to lock down your intellectual property. Yeah, Justin and then Jess.
Just out of curiosity, so your trademark that you've registered, you've registered that nationally? Okay.
With the USPTO. And then what I've done for my copyright stuff, like the playground personalities or the Forgotten Five, these are some of the themes in my book. I've copyrighted it through the USPTO online. And you pay the $35 and you get a response that says this document is copyrighted. And so I have that too.
Which part of your book, which parts of your book or which topics in your book have you found to be the most commented on when you go to speak? Or
It's the playground personalities, the who's who. So whether you're the person who likes to collaborate with people or likes to live by lists or likes to live by action or likes to live by vision, that's the stuff that people talk about the most. And so the playground personality concept is not trademarked, it's just copyrighted. But the lawyers have told me that as long as I can show that I'm using it and that I was the first one to use it, and which we can show, then the copyright should be fine. It's just a little cheaper than trademarking everything, because you don't have to go through all the legal issues.
Right.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Good, Justin.
I just have a logistical question.
Okay.
If you are only hiring on a contract or stipend basis, you have to issue 1099s for that work, is
Yes.
that correct? What is the process for doing that? Would you recommend having an accountant prepare those at the end of the year, or is there an easy way to put that together online?
I have about 5 or 6 1099s that I send out every year through QuickBooks. It's really easy because you code their employee identification number. They might have just their social security number, or if they have a employer identification number, you can have that too. And at the end of the year, you can run a 1099 report and fill it out yourself. You can get forms free from the IRS. You don't have to buy them at Staples. And you don't have to put them in the special windowed envelope. You can fold them and stick them in an envelope. As long as you fill out the 1096, which is like the cover form that goes to the IRS, that says this is how much money I paid out, because you're going to take that as an expense on your tax return. So they've got a balance.
Can you also do that through QuickBooks?
You absolutely can do it through QuickBooks. And you can get the 1096s free from the IRS too. You don't have to get them, you don't have to buy like 100 of them if you only need one or two. If your accountant is going to do it, he or she probably won't charge you that much because it's not that hard to do. But you can either do it yourself, use the QuickBooks, or have an accountant do it. Yeah.
The other thing now is that any vendor that you pay more than $600.
$600.
You got
That's the magic number.
Which is such a
And that's been $600 for as long as I've been in business, so 13 years. So
I thought that was new with the healthcare reform.
no, 600 for any, so if I want to pay somebody under $600, I don't have to cut them, if I pay someone $550, I don't have to cut them a 1099. But if I pay them $660, I have to, or $601, I have to cut them a 1099.
I think what changed with healthcare reform is that not just people, but any vendor. Like if you bought more than $600 of stuff from Staples, you have to issue them a 1099.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well,
What
yeah,
does that
that's
have to do with
crazy.
healthcare?
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to check that
I
out.
thought it was only like paid contract work.
Because
No, it changed
Staples,
with healthcare reform. I'm feeling the pain this year.
no, yeah, I haven't, my accountant hasn't given me that bad news
Yeah.
yet.
Well, maybe it's all people for you, so you got it all covered probably.
But I do buy supplies, and I use professional services, marketing people,
Yeah.
PR
And you
people.
got issue 1099s
Yeah.
for all of them.
I've issued 1099s to my trademark attorneys and
Yeah.
my CPA guys. They're all LLCs. I definitely, because it's cash. Whereas Staples, I'm putting it on a credit card. So they have to have some way of calculating all the revenue.
Yeah, but they still make you issue like to Staples, to Home Depot, like.
So like if I stay at a
Some
Marriott,
people really doing with that piece of paper, right?
yeah, if I stay at a Marriott hotel, I'd have to send them a 1099.
It was over $600. Bam, that's my understanding.
Okay.
There's obviously a lot
I'm
of
hoping that's not the case.
turmoil over this, because people are saying, what is this happening?
Yeah, that's, first of all, Marriott would have to hire like 100 people just to manage that 1099.
How many would I get?
Yeah, right. Thousands, tens of thousands.
Yeah.
You know, there's an application that we stumbled across that I've never used, but it was a company started by a bunch of ex-QuickBooks people. It's called Outright, and it looks like they do all that stuff, like you can issue 1099s, but it has like 90% less functionality than QuickBooks, which is probably 100% of what you need.
Right.
I haven't
Right.
used it, but if it.
Yeah, I don't use half the
Well,
screens in my QuickBook, in my QuickBooks.
There's several companies, startups are coming out there addressing those.
Yeah,
A lot cheaper.
yeah, a lot cheaper. And I don't use the online services, I just kind of do it manually. All right, guys, well, I hope that was helpful.
That was.
Some insights. You're welcome. Just know that I'm available as an entrepreneurial mentor. If you need, if you're a little worried, or you have to hire someone, or God forbid let someone go, whatever, get a hold of Fulia. She'll connect you and me, and we'll talk and work it through.
And for your clients that you work on an ad hoc basis?
Yes.
Is it per engagement, is it an hourly, how do you?
It's an unfair question because for the startups, I would never charge what I charge my commercial businesses. So I've got retainer models where they pay me a couple $1,000 a month. They call me when they need me.
Right.
I don't have an hourly model except for my coaching. When I do executive coaching, I
Right.
charge by the hour. But if anyone ever needed help that I could just do over the phone for 20 minutes, I wouldn't charge anybody. But if you wanted me to do a project or work on something, then I would do the best I could to kind of give you a discount,
Okay.
knowing where you are
So it's
in
based on
your.
the individual.
It absolutely
project,
is, yeah. And then all my clients, I have to say, I can't charge Marriott $100 and IBM $300 because that wouldn't be fair because people talk. So when I'm at that level, I charge the same amount of money. But if I'm working with startups or folks that are nonprofits that don't have a lot of fusion of cash, I do a lot of pro bono work.